Hi, in this video, I'll be looking at the poem My Lost Duchess, written by Robert Browning. So, this poem is written in the form of a dramatic monologue. So, in a dramatic monologue, there is a speaker and a listener. So in a dramatic monologue, there's a speaker and a listener. Um, what is a dramatic monologue? A poem in the form of a speech or narrative by an imagined person in which the speaker inadvertently reveals aspects of their characters while describing a particular situation or series of events. So remember, there's a speaker and there's a listener. The listener will be silent all through the poem. He or she will not speak. The person will only be a listener, nothing more than that. Let us look at the poem before I start with the explanation. Just read it through together. My Lost Duchess by Robert Browning. Ferrara, that's my lost Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. I call that piece a wonder now. Fra Pandolf's hands worked busily a day, and there she stands. Will it please you sit and look at her? I said, Fra Pandolf by design, for never read strangers like you that pictured countenance, the depth and passion of its earnest glance. But to myself they turned, since none puts by the curtain I've drawn for you, but I, and seemed as they would ask me, if they durst, how such a glance came there. So, not the first are you to turn and ask thus, Sir, 'twas not her husband's presence only, called the spot of joy into the Duchess' cheek. Perhaps Fra Pandolf chanced to say, her mantle laps over my lady's wrist too much, or paint half flush that dies along her throat. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, and cause enough for calling up the spot of joy. She had a heart, how shall I say, too soon made glad, too easily impressed. She liked water she looked on, and our looks went everywhere. Sir, 'twas all one, my favour at her breast, the dropping of the daylight in the west, the bulk of cherries some officers full broke in the orchard for her, the white mule she rode with round the terrace, all and each would draw from her alike the approving speech, or blush at least. She thanked men, good, but thanked somehow, I know not how, as if she ranked my gift of a 900 years old name with anybody's gift. Who'd stoop to blame this sort of trifling, even had you skill in speech, which I have not, to make your will quite clear to such an one, and say, just this or that in you disgust me. Here you miss, or there exceed the mark. And if she let herself be lessoned so, nor plainly set her wits to yours, forsooth and made excuse, in then would be some stooping, and I choose never to stoop. Oh, sir, she smiled, no doubt, whene'er I passed her, but who paused without much the same smile? This grew, I gave commands, then all smiles stopped together. There she stands as if alive. Will it please you rise? We'll meet the company below. Then, I repeat, the Count your master's known munificence is ample warrant that no just pretence of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter's self, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Nay, we'll go together down, sir, Notice Neptune, though, taming a sea-horse, though a rarity, which close of Innsbruck cast in bronze for May. So this is the poem. Let us look at the first line. That's my lost Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. So, as we have looked at it earlier, the poem is written in the form of a dramatic monologue. So the speaker here is the Duke of Ferrara, and it he directs the attention of his words or of his talking um, to the messenger of a count who is a guest. Robert Browning has written in such a way that he is able to engage the readers on a psychological level. The speaker, who is the Duke of Ferrara, starts off by directing his attention to the messenger. So the Duke is trying to remarry again after being widowed. He is trying his best to impress the messenger of a count here. The Duke praises the painting for looking so lifelike. There she stands. If we look at the line, there she stands. The Duke asks the guest to look at the work, to sit down and look at the work. The Duke also explains that he deliberately mentioned the name of the painter. Why? Because strangers like the messenger, strangers like the messenger of a count, always look at the Duchess' painted face with its deep, passionate glance, and turn to the Duke, and only the Duke, since only he pulls back the curtain. So he is the only person who pulls back the curtain and reveals the painting, and act as though they would ask if they dared how an expression like that came into her face. So here the Duke reiterates that the messenger isn't the first person to ask this question. The Duke continues by saying that it wasn't his presence that brought that look into the painted eyes of the Duchess, or the blush of happiness into her painted cheek. He suggests that perhaps Frau Pandolf had happened to compliment her by saying, "Her soul drapes over her wrist too much," or "Pain could never recreate the faint half blush that's fading on her throat." So here the Duke insists that the former Duchess thought that polite comments like those were reason enough to blush, and criticizes her in a halting way. So, as we continue reading the poem, the Duke is not at all speaking in favor of his former wife, the Duchess. Rather, he is criticizing his wife, who is actually no more. So he says, "Sir, it was not her husband's presence only called that spot of joy into the Duchess's cheek." So he says that he's complaining, he's grumbling, "Sir, it was not my presence only that made her blush." So he is trying to let us know that he doesn't want his wife. Any person who becomes his wife cannot act according to her own whims and desires. Any person who becomes the wife of the Duke has to conform or has to submit to the dictate. Such stuff was courtesy, she thought, So he is complaining, in the sense that any person who compliments her a little bit, she she will blush, she will smile, and you know the happiness will be all over her face, and it made her happy. But somewhere around the corner, the Duke was always watching. Line 1 to 4. My Lost Duchess is written in the form of a dramatic monologue in which the speaker inadvertently reveals aspects of his character while describing a particular situation or series of events. At the beginning of the poem, the painting of the Duke's wife is introduced to us. That's my lost Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. These lines leave us with the suspicion that the Duchess might no longer be alive. We're not so sure about who this Duchess is or where this person could be. So as he talks, as the poem goes on, as the Duke of Ferrara keeps on talking, he talks condescendingly about the Duchess. So as he speaks, he reveals that she is in actuality was a lovely person, sensitive woman and full of joy, while he himself, the Duke, is cruel, jealous, proud, and a very arrogant person. The messenger is here to broker a marriage deal, representing another aristocrat, the count. So perhaps he is pointing a refined finger as the first line starts. So if we look at it, obviously this is the um, interior of his home. He is inside his house. It must be a palace. If that first line is innocent enough, the second line immediately darkens the proceedings of the Duke. The woman in question is no longer alive, but looks alive in painting. It is kind of odd when we look at it from a very normal point of view, because of course a painting shows a person alive and not the opposite, that. But it makes us wonder who this person could be, possibly. The speaker thinks the picture as a wonder, more like an object. So here it is also interesting to know that regardless of whether the Duchess is alive or dead, the Duke views the Duchess more like an object. So a painting or the Duchess, according to the eyes of the Duke, they are more or less the same. The Duchess, who is alive, and the painting. If we were to put that together, um, they are more or less the same according to or for the Duke. The speaker thinks the picture a wonder, perhaps because he's had a little time to digest it and ponder on the fact that his wife is no more. When the painting was first hung, he couldn't stand to look at it because it reminded him of her beauty, her character, or maybe the portrait was done too well, was too lifelike, and so he felt compelled to put it behind a curtain. Was it out of guilt? Did he not want to show other people? That is something which we need to figure it out ourselves. The artist's name is Fra Pandolf. The mentioning of this specific name, the name of the artist, is also a clever ploy by the Duke. The artist's name is Fra Pandolf. So if you look at the word Fra, meaning a brother, which links the artist to innocent monkhood and distances the Duchess from any thought of a sexual liaison with him. Line 5 to 21. The Duke asked the as yet unknown person if he cared to sit and study the portrait. So, like I've said, Fra Pendle's name was mentioned purposefully because the Duke is the one asked by strangers. So, whenever strangers come to see the painting, um, strangers they tend to ask or they try to ask, but um, why do they try to ask or why do they tend to? They try to ask by looking at the Duchess's expressive face or countenance, that facial expression. They want to ask, instance like, how did the artist get? If we look at the name of the painter from Pendle, his name is interesting because the Duke mentions Fra Pendle's name purposefully or by design. Because whenever strangers come to study or see the painting, these strangers would look at the Duchess's expressive face or her facial appearance, and the Duke was always able to figure out strangers, wanting to ask him, how is the painter able to get so much depth and passion in a simple glance? How is the painter able to draw such or to paint this expressive face by just looking at her? But very interestingly, no one dared to ask him that question. Not even a single person. But the Duke is able to see, the Duke is able to figure out every time whenever strangers come to see the painting or to study the painting. Again, here, he is the only person who is allowed to move the curtain, implying control and possession over the Duchess even after she is dead. It seems the broker or the messenger of the Count also wanted to ask the same question. How is Fra Pandolf able to get so much depth and passion by just looking at her simple glance? So he addresses the messenger as Sir. Remember, he is addressing him as Sir because he wants something and he is trying to get something. His something is he wants to remarry again and he wants the daughter of the Count. So he is trying to be respectful, but in actuality, he has no regards for a person like the messenger because they're just common people. Once he gets what he wants, he will be just another fool. Nothing more than that. But at the moment, he is onto something and he wants something. And the messenger can be a tool for him to get what he wants. That is why he is trying to be, he's acting to be respectful. The Duke seems to think that it should have been only him who could have made the Duchess blush, not anyone else. In other words, the Duke is fabricating a story, attempting to brainwash the messenger that the Duchess in fact was not a faithful person. So according to the Duke, his wife would have both the artist's politeness, which is rather judgmental of him, and surely points to an increasing jealousy. Perhaps in real life, he never was able to inspire such blushes or glances from his wife. That must be the case. Line 23-34. The Duke goes on, seemingly unable to stop himself, telling of his wife's happy disposition and positive outlook on life. Again, there is judgment. It's as if the Duke despised her for being too easily impressed, suggesting that she was frivolous. She was just superficial, unable to discern or unable to figure out the importance of what is necessary or what is not necessary. The Duchess treated everyone with the same light touch, which must have displeased the Duke, despite him being her closest bosom friend or her partner. So the thing which the Duke wasn't happy was the Duchess would treat everything equally or every person equally, in the sense that putting her husband on the same level with any person, any common people, something which the Duke was not at all happy. But in actuality, if we look at the Duchess, she was in fact a lovely person, full of joy and happiness. But apparently, the Duke was not able to see how good the Duchess was. She was too light-hearted, it appears, according to the Duke. Happy to ride on a white mule, happy to accept fruit from a fool. Perhaps the Duke took a dislike. He did not like him. He did not like her constant innocent optimism and equal treatment for all approach to life. So it's clear. He wasn't happy with the attitude or the character of the Duchess, his last Duchess. So what does he want? Or what did he wanted? He wanted his wife to be subservient, not a blushing, flirtatious type, not to be independent, but to be loyal and to do whatever he commanded. That was what he wanted. The Duke was also seemingly not happy with the way his Duchess treated his 900 years of his family name, because she treated the Duke's 900 years of family name with anyone else's name, something which the Duke was not at all happy. The Duke's complaints are building up. So as the poem goes on, it's building up higher and higher. Who would stoop to blame? So why should I lower down to her level and tell her, no, you cannot do this. You're not supposed to do that. You're my wife. And I'm your husband. You can only do this. You can only smile at me. You can only blush. And the reason should be only me, not other people, not some officers, fools, people around you. No, it should be only me. That's what he's trying to say. But why should I? Why should I go down to her level? I am too great a person and I would never lower down at her level and correct her. And I don't think I have the verbal skill to do that. That's what he's trying to say here. But remember, he is a very clever person. He has this verbal skills. He's very clever. But he does not want to lower down, or he did not want to lower down. He says that he never stooped that low, or say down to a level. But in real life, he probably did. Remember, he's talking to the man who will report to his own boss. He's talking to the messenger who will go back to his boss and then report about the Duke, about the suitability of the Duke for hand in marriage of a second aristocratic female. So the Duke is constantly addressing this man as Sir and subtly plying him with fake news about his first wife. So whatever he has spoken up till this point of time, he has not spoken in a approving or in a positive light about his last Duchess, but in a very disparaging or in a very negative perspective. In lines 45 and 46, the poem shudders and shocks. The Duke had the smiles stopped. The Duke had the smiles of the Duchess stopped. So what does this mean? Does this mean he had someone murdered his wife? Or did he send her off to somewhere? Maybe to a convent? Line 46 to 56. The Duke repeats what he said in lines 2 and 4. There she stands as if alive. It's a chilling statement to end what has been an avalanche of pitiful, snobbish complaint from the Duke. He asks the messenger to stand up and go down below. The Count again here. The Count is known for his wealth, so he expects to get a decent dowry, and that of course it's the Count's daughter who is uppermost in his thoughts. Remember, he says that I will not accept a simple dowry. I want a handsome dowry if I am marrying the Count's daughter. But again, let me assure you that the daughter of a Count is my chief objective. I only want to marry her, nothing more than that. And I want her to be my wife. But you should also not forget to tell your master that I want a handsome dowry, not a simple dowry. So here, I repeat, the Count your master's non-munificence is ample warrant that no just pretense of mine for dowry will be disallowed, though his fair daughter herself, as I avowed at starting, is my object. Look at the line, look at these three words, is my object. So here, his only objective is to get the daughter of a Count. That's what he's trying to say here. But in other words, even the daughter of a Count will be just an object. He will treat her as an object, nothing more than that. She will not be able to act independently. She will not be able to act in her own ways. She has to be subservient. She has to be loyal. She has to do whatever the Duke wants her to do. As they descend, the Duke points out another work of art, this time a sculpture of Neptune taming a seahorse. Again, the theme is dominance. The Roman god of the sea managing to control the tiny seahorse, just as the Duke controls the picture by being the only one allowed to move the curtain. So here, what is the significance of the reference to the statue of Neptune by the Duke? The reference to the statue by Neptune, the reference to the statue of Neptune by the Duke reveals the controlling and dominating character of the Duke. The Neptune taming a seahorse is the Duke who seeks to bring control over his wife. So the Duchess is emblematic of a seahorse that is powerless and has to obey in order to live. So whoever comes under his control will be powerless and has to obey in order to live or in order to survive. By mentioning the name of Clause of Innsbruck, the Duke is showing that he's really in it for the money and prestige. His ego and vanity cannot be suppressed. The poem ends with the words "from me." So how accurate is that? His objective is only for money and fame, for prestige. The reader has to decide whether or not this man has done away with the Duchess. So in my point of view, he must have killed her. Did she die in sorrow, informing the artist to paint that spot of joy in defiance of her pretentious, jealous husband? That's something which the reader has to figure out. Now let's look at the questions and answers. What is the painting a metaphor of? The painting is a metaphor for the Duke's idea of ideal behavior for the Duchess. The painting is not a memorial of his late wife, but it is a metaphor for the Duke's insecurity, jealousy, and controlling behavior. So according to the Duke, or to the Duke, any person who comes under his control will be just an object. What are the circumstances under which the Duke and the envoy meet? The envoy of the Count is in the presence of the Duke of Ferrara to negotiate for a hand in marriage of the daughter of the Count the Duke wishes to marry. Use any five adjectives to describe the character of the Duke. The Duke is portrayed as a cruel, jealous, proud, arrogant, and a very controlling man. All these traits are reflected through his actions and are not verbally mentioned in the poem. What is the significance of the reference to the statue of Neptune by the Duke? The reference to the statue of Neptune by the Duke reveals the controlling and dominating character of the Duke. Neptune taming a seahorse is the Duke who seeks to bring control over his wife. The Duke is emblematic of a seahorse that is powerless and has to obey in order to live. Paint a picture of the Duke's character based on the poem. The poem My Last Duchess by Robert Browning is written in the form of a dramatic monologue in which the speaker inadvertently reveals aspects of his character while describing a particular situation or series of events. At the beginning of the poem, the painting of the Duke's wife is introduced to us. That's my last Duchess painted on the wall, looking as if she were alive. These lines leave us with the suspicion that the Duchess is no longer alive. As he talks condescendingly about the Duchess, he reveals that she in actuality was a lovely, sensitive woman and full of joy, while he himself is cruel, jealous, proud, and arrogant. He felt great jealousy because the Duchess found joy all around her and favored others besides himself with her smiles. The Duke's jealousy and his arrogance are shown in his attitude towards his family name, representative of his social position. He resents that the Duchess appreciated the sunset or a cherry bough as much as he valued taking his name. The use of the word my in the title suggests that the Duke feels a sense of ownership towards women, in particular his wife. In his mind, women are objects and ought to behave in a very specific way, a way that is constructed and sanctioned by man. In addition, the hint that the Duke may have murdered his wife shows his inflated sense of superiority. He believes that he has the right to end her life because she is not as valuable or important as him. Why does the Duke appear to be unhappy with his lost Duchess? In the poem My Lost Duchess, the Duke appears to be unhappy with his wife for a number of reasons. First of all, he says that his wife often blushes at others disregarding his 900 years old name and adds that her deep, passionate glance is not solely reserved for him. Furthermore, the Duchess did not distinguish between the gifts brought to her by her husband and those brought to her by servants and strangers. She treated everyone equally and did not elevate the gifts and conversations of her husband above those of others. In other words, the Duchess did not live up to the Duke's expectations. From these examples, we see that the Duke wanted a wife who was totally dedicated to him and him only. The use of the word my in the title suggests that the Duke feels a sense of ownership towards women, in particular his wife. In his mind, women are objects and ought to behave in a very specific way, a way that is constructed and sanctioned by man. What is the impression that the Duke is trying to create of the Duchess in the eyes of the audience? The Duchess is trying to convey to the envoy who has come to broker a new marriage for the Duke that his deceased wife was disloyal to him. He blames her for not bestowing her love, affection, and even smiles and blushes exclusively on him. He implies that she would have been unfaithful because her affections were too far ranging. She liked everything and everybody equally in her eyes. She comes across as a sweet, innocent young woman who loves the world around her and expresses her joy in it. She loves cherish her mule and other common people. She is a friendly and likable person who has a far kinder and less snobbish character than her husband. Explain the theme of appearance versus reality as expressed in the poem. So the theme of appearance versus reality engages the reader to overlook apparent behavioral aspects and shows us the other aspects which are not apparent but are crucial to the development of the poem. The focus is also on the discrepancy between appearances and realities. On the surface, the poem is about the Duke and the envoy of the Count who has come to negotiate with the Duke for the Count's daughter the Duke wishes to marry. It appears to capture a well-mannered discussion between the Duke and the envoy. Towards the end of the poem, the Duke says that his main objective is to get the Count's daughter for a hand in marriage. However, behind his clear declaration, there is a grim reality that covers the innocent and compassionate nature of the Duchess and her untimely death. She smiled for him, certainly, but she smiled for everyone, and he found this to be unacceptable. So he says, I gave commands. Then all smiles stopped together. The Duke appears to be polite but is actually a tyrant in reality. How does the poet use the theme of power in the poem? The Duke uses the theme of power to highlight the corrupt power of a domestic tyrant. The Duke views everything that he possesses and everyone with whom he interacts as an opportunity to expand his power base. The Duke of Ferrara obviously considers himself superior to others and above laws and morality. He clearly states that he gave the commands that stopped his wife's smiles altogether. After all, he tells the agent, she liked whether she looked on, and her looks went everywhere. So he uses his power to get others to do his will, including, presumably, the envoy. He uses his power to eliminate his wife and also had a painter and a sculptor to create objects of art to his specifications. He assumes that the envoy will provide the kind of duchess he wants. What makes the Duke of Ferrara especially horrifying is that he feels no repentance and no need for repentance, and he doesn't appear like he will stop his abuse of power anytime soon.